Since I've done most of Team Black and Team Green, it's only fair Lucerys Velaryon, Vhagar's favorite snack with a side of Arax, gets his own video as well. After his untimely death in episode 10, it's unlikely we'll ever see him again moving forward, but perhaps we'll get a flashback, or maybe even see Aemon be haunted by his ghost and how that drives him down the path of Targaryen madness. If I'm not mistaken, Season 2 is supposedly going to open up with Rhaenyra and Daemon searching for Luke's remains. There most likely won't be much to find, though. As gruesome as it sounds, I'm pretty sure most of him is somewhere in Vhagar's stomach. I remember when this episode aired, some people, book readers mainly, actually had a problem with the way Luke died. In the show, it was framed as vehicular manslaughter, but in the books, it was actually cold-blooded murder. But if we're being honest, if we go with the fact that none of the narrators are actually reliable in Fire and Blood, anything could possibly be true. And House of the Dragon has been stated to be the more objective view on things. What really happened? So in a way, it does make sense that it's an accident, and to people on the outside looking in, knowing that Aemon hated Luke and unable to comprehend a Targaryen losing control of his dragon, it does look like straight up murder. But in the books, there was actually more context to Aemon killing Luke. Both in and out of show, Aemon's eye is a sore spot for him, and after confronting Luke at Storm's End, Aemon is actually goaded by one of Lord Boros Baratheon's daughters, whose name is Maris, to kill Luke. Maris was upset that Aemon didn't choose her, so she decides to take a jab at Aemon when Luke is gone. She asks him if Luke took one of his eyes or one of his balls, and this pisses Aemon off so much that he goes and kills Luke. Then it said he cut out Luke's eyes from his corpse and then gifted them to Maris, which I guess they kind of hint at with this line here.
One will serve. I would not blind you. Plan to make a gift of it to my mother.
Though I don't actually think he's that deranged. I think this is just another one of his intimidation tactics, but moving on. Lucerys Velaryon is a tragic character, in the sense that he never got to grow up or truly come into his own. So in this video, we'll break down Lucerys Velaryon, who he was, and who he possibly could have been if that fateful day in the storm had never come to pass. Without further ado, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get into the video. Lucerys Velaryon, really Lucerys Waters, is the second-born son of Rhaenyra Targaryen, the supposed son of her husband Laenor Velaryon, and the actual son of her lover Harwin Strong. Lucerys Velaryon, under the guise of being Laenor's son, is second in line for the Iron Throne after his brother Jacaerys, and next in line for the Driftwood Throne after the fake death of Laenor, though Lucerys doesn't seem to have much desire for positions of power.
Sorry, I don't want it.
I don't want it.
From a young age, Lucerys has had a bit of a troubled childhood with rumors of his parentage and the deaths of his loved ones. His father figure / real dad and grandfather died in some mysterious fire. His aunt asked her own dragon to kill her. Her brother, his legal father, then appears to be murdered. It's sad to see a kid experience so much loss from such a young age, and no one seems to acknowledge the toll it's taking on him. Corlys, his grandfather, doesn't even comfort him when Laena dies. He just lectures him on his future as Lord of the Tides.
Both my seat and high tide will be yours one day, Lucerys. Your brother will be king, of course. He'll sit on endless councils and ceremonies. The Lord of the Tides rules the sea.
But he doesn't care about that. And this whole scene kind of makes me think of a similar one that happens in Game of Thrones between Tommen and Tywin.
Your brother is dead. Do you know what that means?
It means I'll become king.
Yes, you will become king. What kind of king do you think you'll be?
Like Corlys, after the death of a family member, Tywin just swoops in and begins educating Tommen on his future duties. Of course, being a king is important, but his brother just died. Even if he was an asshole, there's a time and a place for things like this. It's terrible that kids in this world aren't even allowed to grieve properly because of power and appearances. You see this with Jace as well. He's more connected to Harwin Strong than he ever was to Laena, but he can't even mourn him how he wants because of how that will look in the eyes of others. It sucks, but in Westeros, that's just how things go. People die and others rise. But why does power always have to be built on death? Like Lucerys says when he's a kid, becoming a lord hinges on the death of the people around him. It's a sad thing to think about, but shows the kind of heart that Lucerys has.
If I'm the Lord of Driftmark, it means everyone's dead.
He truly values and loves the people around him, and would do anything for them, including cutting out his uncle's eye. Now, I've made it pretty clear where I stand with that fight, and call me biased and unfair if you want, but I support Aemon more than anyone in that scenario. But this is about Luke, not him. Still, this is an important event for both characters. I mean, this is literally the reason Luke died to begin with. His slashing of Aemon's eye and receiving no punishment made a wound that festered between both sides of the family. Now, I mentioned briefly in my Aemon video that while I side with Aemon, I don't necessarily blame Luke for what he did in that moment. While I do feel like Aemon was just making empty threats and wasn't actually going to kill them, Luke doesn't know that, and with all the death surrounding his family, he probably wouldn't want to take that chance to begin with. If you listen closely to the argument between the families, Luke actually says something that's pretty easy to miss.
Enough!
In the background, he says, "What was I supposed to do? He was gonna kill Jace." And honestly, maybe I'm reaching, but this moment kind of mirrors what happens in episode 10. When Aemon and Vhagar are chasing Luke and Arax, Arax disobeys Luke and attacks Vhagar. Dragons share a mystical bond with their riders, and it's hinted at numerous times throughout the show that dragons can feel the pains and emotions of their riders. At this moment in episode 10, Arax is feeling fear, not just from himself, but from Luke. It's this shared fear between dragon and rider that ultimately causes him to go off course and attack Vhagar. Now, Aemon didn't intend to kill Luke with Vhagar, but neither Luke or his dragon actually knew that. It's dark, it's raining, storming, and this 100-ton fire-breathing lizard is chasing them down. So just like in the cave when Luke reacts to protect his brother, Arax reacts to protect his rider. What was he supposed to do? Vhagar was going to kill Luke. At least, that's what he thinks. Funnily enough, both these instances of self-defense also end up getting them killed. By cutting out Aemon's eye, it caused Aemon to have a grudge and festering hatred for Luke that led him to chase him into that storm all those years later. It was Arax attacking Vhagar that made her acknowledge him as a threat and therefore kill both dragon and rider. When you take a look at these scenes and how things come full circle, it becomes fairly clear that Lucerys was actually a really important character when it comes to the Dance of the Dragons, despite not having the chance to actively be involved. It makes you wonder, his actions and his death set in motion a series of unfortunate events, so what could have happened if he lived longer? Lucerys Velaryon, despite his importance, was a character that never had the chance to grow into his own. He's a kid in the early stages of being a teenager, just trying to find his place in the world and political system that seemingly doesn't want anything to do with him. Ever since his young years, he believed the lie that Laenor Velaryon was his father, until Aemon hints otherwise, and it's reasonable to assume that the pieces fell into place for him like they did for Jace later on. This disputed lineage has an effect on Luke. It makes him feel like an imposter and unworthy. People say he'll live up to his birthright, but he knows otherwise.
No one would question me being heir to Driftmark if I look more like Sir Laenor Velaryon and Sir Harwin Strong.
This truth that so many people try to keep hidden makes Luke insecure about himself. And as I mentioned numerous times in previous videos, insecurity seems to be a big part of the Targaryen family. Jacaerys, his older brother, is insecure about his own bastardy, and he often tries to cover that up with aggression and violence. Lucerys is the same, but also different. He is insecure, and he may laugh here or there, but he doesn't feign superiority. He's struggling. He's a bastard. The realm doesn't believe in him, and yet he's expected to live up to such grand standards and positions of power. His mother is heir to the throne. His brother is heir after her. His stepfather is a great warrior and dragon rider. His grandfather is a renowned sailor, and as he puts it,
I can't be Lord of the Tides. Grandsire was the greatest sailor who ever lived. I get green sick before the ship even leaves the harbor. I'll just ruin everything.
This, coupled with the fact that Corlys could potentially die, puts a lot of pressure on Luke. He doesn't know if he can do it. Most children only have to worry about upholding one family, but he has to worry about two, bringing honor to both houses Targaryen and Velaryon. These two houses of grand status and legacy. The task seems so daunting, and the weight on his shoulders seems to be crushing, but we never get to see if he can truly bear it since he dies so soon. It's tragic because Luke had the typical makings of a good coming-of-age story. I mean, just how many shows or movies or books have a character uncertain about themselves, their directions in life, glaring insecurities only to go through the motions, their trials and tribulations, coming out the other side stronger, reforged? A lot of them. Viserys even talks about that himself.
There is a part of me wishes I'd been tested. I often think that in the Crucible, I may have been forged a different man.
Perhaps war and conflict could have changed him. Perhaps that would have been the case for Luke. The dance, despite being kicked off by his death, was arguably unavoidable. So if he lived, experienced the war, the death, been forced to make the hard decisions, Would it have changed him? Would he have sunk beneath the waves or risen from the depths? It's an interesting thought that I may tackle in the future. I love toying with what-if ideas in my free time, and I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I scroll on Pinterest for creative inspiration. A common thing I saw on Pinterest after Luke died was actually art of an adult Luke who looked just like Harwin Strong, and he was seemingly an accomplished sailor in his own right, and I think that's what inspired me to do this video. Luke was wasted potential, not because the writers messed him up or anything like that, but because his story ended before it ever truly began. But that's sadly the case with a lot of characters in A Song of Ice and Fire. Some songs are shorter than others. Some jokes never get a punchline.
I once brought a jackass and a honeycomb into a brothel.
It's a tragedy to think about what Luke could have become. A badass sailor and dragon rider, perhaps forging a legend greater than his grandfather's. Maybe he'd be a Lord of the Tides who, ironically, hated the tides and hated to sail. Or maybe he'd be nothing special at all, just some dragon lord with a fleet of ships at his disposal that he may or may not use. We'll never truly know, but that won't stop people from wondering. Either way, R.I.P. Lucerys Velaryon Waters Strong. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.